My brother called my career a joke at Easter dinner. He didn't know he'd be working for me by Monday. My brother was crowned a genius at 12. I was just the little sister he left in the dust. That's how the family dynamics were etched into stone, the unofficial history of the Vance household. It wasn't born of malice, not really. It was a simple narrative easy for everyone to grasp, and it began the year Leo built his first working computer from discarded parts he'd scavenged from the neighborhood electronics recycling day. He was a prodigy. The machine whirred to life in our cluttered garage, its green text blinking on a salvaged monitor, and in that moment, he became a myth. Our parents, Robert and Carol, stood in awe, their faces illuminated by the screen's glow. While Leo was soldering motherboards, I was doing what little sisters did. In their eyes, I was playing. Building intricate Lego castles with functioning drawbridges, organizing the neighborhood kids into elaborate multi-act plays, creating detailed budgets for my Girl Scout troops' cookie sales. None of it registered on the same scale. It wasn't coding. It wasn't circuits. It wasn't genius. The pattern was reinforced at every turn. In 6th grade, I poured my heart into a project on solar energy, building a miniature house with panels that actually powered a tiny light bulb. I won first place at the school science fair. I remember running home, the blue ribbon clutched in my hand, my heart soaring. I burst into the kitchen to find my parents celebrating Leo. He'd just won a statewide coding competition. His award was a heavy, embossed certificate in a leather folder. My blue ribbon suddenly felt flimsy, childish. "Oh, that's wonderful, honey," Mom said, her eyes still fixed on the complex certificate in Leo's hand, her praise feeling like a polite afterthought. "Your project on solar energy was pretty basic, though, wasn't it?" Leo chimed in, not cruelly, but with the casual, unthinking superiority of someone who has never been questioned. My algorithm had to optimize data sorting for 1,000,000 entries. My father, Robert, a brilliant accountant who considered programming the DVR a Herculean task, would just shake his head in wonder. "Incredible, son. Truly incredible. Your mother and I can barely figure out the television." He'd look at Leo like he was a visitor from another planet, speaking a language of the future that only he could understand. When Leo spoke of Python and C++, their eyes would glaze over with a mixture of profound pride and total incomprehension. My achievements, making honor roll, being elected class president, winning debate tournaments, were met with a pat on the head. "That's nice, Clara. Nice." The word was a placid little tombstone for my efforts. This established hierarchy, this unspoken family law, shadowed me through high school. I remember winning the regional debate championship my junior year. I came home with a large, gleaming trophy. My father looked at it, smiled, and said, "That's great, Clara. Really great." 5 minutes later, he was on the phone with my uncle, and I overheard him say, "You won't believe what Leo did. His robotics team just qualified for nationals. The boy is just on another level." My trophy sat on the mantelpiece gathering dust, while Leo's latest accomplishment became the headline news of our family's life. My victories in business classes and leadership positions were always treated as the soft, fuzzy prelude to the main event. The family narrative was set, and everyone played their part. The chasm between us became an unbridgeable canyon when college applications came around. Leo predictably was accepted into a prestigious tech university with a hefty scholarship for computer science. The house buzzed with excitement for weeks. I chose a top-tier business program at another excellent university, a school with a stellar reputation. I was proud of my acceptance. I thought just maybe this would be the thing that leveled the playing field. I was wrong. I remember announcing it at the dinner table. Leo put down his fork and let out a small derisive snort. He tried to hide it with a cough, but the damage was done. "Business, huh?" He said, a smirk playing on his lips. He looked at me then, at our parents, as if sharing an inside joke. I guess not everyone can handle the rigor of a real STEM program. The air went still. My mother offered a week Leo be nice. My father just clapped him on the shoulder. "Well, son, you've earned your bragging rights." Then turning away from me completely, he asked, "So tell me more about this advanced physics course you're taking." The hierarchy was not just validated, it was reinforced with steel. I felt invisible, my accomplishments dissolving into thin air. But there was one person who saw me, really saw me. My grandmother Evelyn. Grandma Evelyn was an anomaly in our family, A retired mathematics professor who had navigated the male-dominated academic world of the 1970s, she owned a smartphone she actually knew how to use and read scientific journals for fun. She was sharp, incisive, and missed nothing. During Christmas break of my sophomore year, I was feeling particularly small. Leo had spent the entire dinner regaling the family with tales of his prestigious internship at a tech giant, using acronyms and technical jargon like a shield to keep everyone else out. I had just successfully managed a campus-wide charity drive that raised over $50,000, but it felt trivial in comparison. Later that evening, as I was helping Grandma Evelyn with the dishes, she placed a warm, dry hand over mine, stopping me. She looked me straight in the eye, her gaze clear and unwavering. "They don't see it yet. Clara," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "They're blinded by the blinking lights and the fancy words." I just shrugged, the frustration bubbling up. "But what am I supposed to do, Grandma? He's the genius. It feels like nothing I accomplish will ever be enough." "Don't you dare," she whispered fiercely, her grip tightening on my hand. "He builds the engines, Clara. It's a fine skill, a brilliant one even. But you will build the empires. You understand people, you see systems, you grasp the big picture. That is a rare and powerful gift, and in technology, it's the thing that truly matters in the end. Don't you ever forget that." Her words were a lifeline. Someone saw. Someone understood. That night, I made a silent vow. I wouldn't just try to keep up anymore. I would learn his world, not to join it, but to conquer it on my own terms. I would focus on my strengths, the systems, the people, the strategy. I would build my empire brick by silent brick. I graduated with honors, my name called out to a smattering of polite applause from my family. I'd landed a coveted marketing position at a promising tech firm, a foot in the door of the industry Leo claimed I wasn't cut out for. At the celebratory dinner afterward, the mood was cheerful, but the old dynamic was a ghost at the table. "So marketing for a tech company," Leo said, swirling the wine in his glass. He didn't look at me, but at the restaurant's ceiling, as if contemplating a complex problem. "So you'll be making pretty brochures for products you don't understand." The insult was slick, delivered with the casual air of an undisputed fact. I felt the familiar heat rise in my cheeks. I saw my mother flinch, but she said nothing, busying herself with her napkin. My father was already asking Leo about his post-graduation plans to launch his own startup, his voice full of the booming pride that was always reserved for his son. The bitterness of his words mixed with the sweetness of the graduation cake. In that moment, a quiet fire ignited within me, a promise whispered to myself that one day he would not just see me, he would have to look up. That vow I made at my graduation dinner became the fuel. The bitterness of Leo's words, the casual cruelty of them, didn't break me. It forged me. While he was out seeking venture capital and talking a big game, I went to work. 7 years of silent, relentless climbing led me to a single file on my desk. Inside was the name of the man who said I'd never make it, my brother. The first few years were a grind. I took that marketing job, and I didn't just make pretty brochures. I made it my mission to understand our products better than the engineers who built them. I spent my lunches in the engineering department, asking questions, absorbing the architecture, learning the language of the machine. My evenings were not spent at happy hours, but in stuffy classrooms at the local community college, the smell of stale coffee thick in the air. I took night classes in basic programming, Python, Java, C++. I had no ambition to become a developer. My goal was different. I wanted to speak the language. I wanted to understand the foundation of the world Leo claimed as his exclusive domain, so I could build my empire on top of it. And I did. While Leo was loudly announcing his first round of seed funding for his flashy startup Apex Innovations, I was quietly promoted to marketing director. I didn't announce it at a family dinner, I just updated my LinkedIn profile. When he was featured in a popular tech blog hailed as a visionary founder, I was recruited by Nexus Dynamics, a titan in enterprise software, to join their product strategy team. Each move I made was calculated and quiet. Each step he took was a press release. Family gatherings became a painful exercise in restraint. He'd hold court-dropping terms like neural networks and blockchain architecture into conversations about casserole recipes, effectively silencing everyone else at the table. He'd look at me with pity. Don't worry if you don't get it, Clara. It's pretty complex stuff. And I would just smile, nod, and mentally dissect the flaws in the business model he was so proud of. I remember one Sunday dinner, I'd just been made a senior strategist, a significant step. When a lull appeared, I mentioned it. My mother smiled and said, "Oh, that's lovely, dear." Immediately, Leo jumped in. "You guys will not believe the new espresso machine we got for the office. It's a dual boiler Italian import. The team's productivity is going to skyrocket." For the next 10 minutes, my father peppered him with questions about steam wands and grind consistency, my promotion completely forgotten. That was the game. His trivialities were fascinating. My milestones were footnotes. My ability to translate between the deep tech teams and the business-focused executives made me a valuable asset at Nexus. I could sit with engineers and understand their challenges, then walk into a boardroom and explain the market implications to the C-suite. My career progression accelerated. After 2 years in product strategy, I was moved to business development. 3 years after that, I was named Director of Strategic Acquisitions. It was a position that perfectly merged my business acumen with my hard-won technical fluency. My team's job was to hunt. We were corporate predators, tasked with identifying promising smaller companies that Nexus could either absorb to enhance our own offerings or acquire to eliminate a future competitor. It was ruthless analytical work, and I was exceptionally good at it. Which brings me to that Tuesday morning. The air in my corner office was cool, and still the city skyline a placid backdrop. My assistant Parker slid a stack of preliminary reports onto my desk. "This week's acquisition targets, Clara," he said. "A few interesting ones in the machine learning space." I picked up the first file. Standard stuff. A promising team solid tech burning through cash too quickly. The usual story. I flipped to the second file. The company was called Apex Innovations. My breath caught in my throat. The world seemed to narrow to the crisp black letters on the tab. It couldn't be. But there it was, right below the company name. Founder Leo Vance. My brother. My first instinct, the one drilled into me by years of corporate ethics training, was to recuse myself immediately. Conflict of interest was an understatement. I reached for the phone to pass the file to a colleague, but my hand paused. A different feeling, a darker and more powerful one, took hold. Morbid curiosity. For years I had only heard Leo's carefully curated narrative of success. Now I held the real story in my hands, the unvarnished truth. What had he really built? How was his company really performing? I opened the file. What I found was both shocking and, in a strange way, validating. The technology at the core of Apex Innovations was genuinely brilliant. I had to give him that. He had developed an innovative approach to machine learning, an algorithm so elegant and efficient it made our own data science team's work look clumsy by comparison. It was a jewel. But the company built around that jewel was a disaster. A complete and utter financial train wreck. He had burned through 2 rounds of funding with almost no revenue to show for it. I flipped through the pages, my eyes scanning the damning figures. Their monthly burn rate was a horrifying $500,000, against what revenues of barely $10,000. It wasn't a business. It was a vanity project funded by a bonfire of investor cash. Their customer acquisition costs were astronomical. Their marketing strategy was a chaotic mess of buzzwords with no clear direction. There was no sustainable business model, no clear path to profitability. All the things he had dismissed as trivial, the pretty brochure side of tech, were the very things sinking his ship. He had built a revolutionary engine, but had forgotten to build the car, the wheels, or even a map. His company was 3, maybe 4 months from total collapse. A grim smile touched my lips, so this was the visionary in action. I scheduled a meeting with my boss, Monica Reynolds, our chief strategy officer. I walked into her office, the file feeling like a lead weight in my hands. My own career was on the line here. One wrong move, one hint of personal bias, and my reputation for ruthless objectivity would be shattered. I took a deep breath, marshaling my thoughts. "I need to disclose a potential conflict of interest on one of the new targets," I said, my voice even as I sat down across from her. "Apex Innovations. The founder is my brother." Monica raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "I didn't realize your brother was in tech, Clara." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Oh, he makes sure everyone knows he's in tech. He just doesn't advertise that his sister works for what he calls a corporate sellout like Nexus Dynamics. We discussed the ethics of the situation at length. I was adamant about my professional integrity. I'll recuse myself from any direct negotiations, I stated clearly. But I believe the asset is worth pursuing. What asset? Monica asked, leaning forward. The report says the company is hemorrhaging cash. We're not acquiring the company, I explained, my voice steady and confident. We're acquiring the intellectual property, specifically the core algorithm. It's revolutionary. We can plug it into our flagship product, and it will leapfrog our competition by at least 2 years. We're buying the jewel, Monica, not the broken box it comes in. My analysis was cold, objective, and compelling. After a thorough review with her own team, she agreed. The acquisition of Apex Innovations made perfect sense for Nexus Dynamics, regardless of my personal connection. My knowledge of the technology and admittedly its founder was a valuable asset. Just keep everything by the book, Clara, Monica advised, her tone firm. Document every communication. We need to ensure there's no appearance of either favoritism or sabotage. For the next 3 months, I watched from the periphery as our acquisition team performed its due diligence. Their findings only confirmed my initial assessment. Brilliant technology hampered by disastrous business execution. And through it all, in the few family gatherings that occurred during that period, Leo remained completely oblivious. He'd continue to talk down to me, explaining the basics of his industry, while I sat there silently knowing more about his company's precarious financial state than he could possibly imagine I understood. The dramatic irony was so thick I could taste it. The acquisition was finalized 1 week before Easter. Apex Innovations would become a subsidiary of Nexus Dynamics. The financial terms were generous, far more than the company's performance warranted, but we were paying for the IP and the talent, not the non-existent revenue. Leo would stay on as a technical advisor for 1 year, reporting to a manager in our engineering division, who ironically reported directly to a VP in my organizational structure. As Easter Sunday loomed closer, a knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. Should I tell the family? Should I warn Leo? The weight of the secret was suffocating. I finally broke down and called the one person I could trust. Grandma Evelyn, I said, my voice trembling slightly. Clara, dear, what's wrong? I explained everything. The acquisition, the dinner, my mounting dread. You have done nothing wrong, Clara, she said, her voice a firm anchor in my sea of anxiety. You have built an incredible career, and you have conducted yourself with unimpeachable ethics throughout this entire process. If your brother has misrepresented his success or underestimated yours, that is a truth for him to reconcile, not for you to hide. But it's going to be so awkward, I groaned, burying my face in my hands. I could hear the smile in her voice. Perhaps. But sometimes, my dear, a little awkwardness is necessary for growth. Go to the dinner, be yourself, and let the truth find its way to the table. I hung up the phone, her words echoing in my mind. Peace built on lies isn't peace, my dear. It's a cage. It's time to be free. She was right. I wasn't going to preemptively reveal anything. I wouldn't lie if asked, but I wouldn't volunteer the information. Let Leo spin his version first. After all these years of living in his shadow, I was curious to see how he would present his company's successful exit. I was curious to see the story he would tell. As I walked back to the dining room, my grandmother's words were a shield around my heart. Let the truth find its way to the table. I took my seat beside my boyfriend Ben and across from my grandmother Evelyn. The air was thick with the aroma of honey-glazed ham and my mother's famous yeast rolls, a scent that usually meant comfort and celebration. Tonight, it felt like the cloying perfume at a funeral. A funeral for the quiet, accommodating version of myself I had played for 3 decades. The dinner table was set for a feast, but I knew it was a battlefield, and my brother had just launched a full-scale assault. For the first 20 minutes, the conversation was deceptively safe, the kind of polite, surface-level chatter that families use to wallpaper over deep cracks. We talked about our aunt's upcoming trip to Italy, a cousin's new baby, the unseasonably warm spring weather. All the while, I could feel Leo vibrating with impatience like a racehorse at the starting gate, waiting for the conversation to turn to the only topic he considered worthy himself. He was seated strategically at the center of the table, directly across from our father, the perfect position to command the room. His wife Sophia sat beside him wearing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was a good person, a pediatric nurse whose groundedness was the only thing that kept Leo from floating away on his own ego. But tonight, even she looked strained. Finally, a lull in the conversation gave him the opening he craved. He cleared his throat, a theatrical sound that made everyone turn. "So, Dad," he began, leaning forward with an air of magnanimity after this acquisition, "I've been giving your retirement portfolio some thought. I've got some unique insights into where the tech sector is headed, some real disruptive opportunities the mainstream analysts are missing. I could really maximize your returns." Our father beamed his chest, puffing with pride. "That would be wonderful, son. I could certainly use the help. Your mind just works on a different level." Leo then launched into a full-blown monologue, a master class in self-aggrandizement disguised as industry analysis. He spoke of his shrewd exit strategy, painting the acquisition not as the desperate lifeline it was, but as his own brilliant chess move. He was the visionary who knew precisely when to cash in his chips. He used phrases like optimizing for shareholder value and strategic realignment of assets, words that meant nothing in the context of his failing company, but sounded impressive to our family of accountants, teachers, and nurses. He was a conductor, and our family was his orchestra, their nods and murmurs of impressed agreement the music he lived for. He spoke of the immense pressure, the lonely burden of the founder. "You're at the helm of the ship, navigating through a hurricane while everyone else is just a passenger," he said, gesturing with his wineglass. "You have to make the hard calls. You have to see the iceberg before anyone else even feels a chill." It's a weight, a heavy weight, but that's the price of innovation. My boyfriend Ben, ever the diplomat, saw the dismissive glance Leo threw my way and tried to build a bridge. "Clara works in tech too," he offered helpfully into the stream of Leo's jargon. Leo paused, turning to Ben with a condescending smile. He let out a short, dismissive laugh. "Yeah," he said, his voice dripping with patronage. "Clara does marketing for some corporate giant. It's important work, I'm sure, keeping the lights on, but it's not quite the same as being in the trenches, is it, founding and exiting a startup, taking the actual risks, building something from nothing." He turned away from Ben, dismissing him as easily as he'd dismissed me my entire life. The insult landed a quiet, sharp sting that only Ben, Grandma Evelyn, and I seemed to feel. The temperature in the room dropped a few degrees. I saw Ben's knuckles turn white as he gripped his fork. I focused on my plate, methodically cutting my green beans into perfectly even pieces, pouring all my focus into the tiny controllable act to keep the rage from boiling over. My mother, sensing the shift, tried to redirect. "Clara has been promoted several times, Leo. She's doing very well for herself." Sure, Leo waved his hand, a gesture of magnanimous concession. "I'm sure she's great at whatever marketing stuff she does, PowerPoints and whatnot. But let's be real." He leaned forward, lowering his voice as if sharing a profound secret with the entire table. "It's not the same. The tech industry, the real tech industry, it separates the visionaries from the support staff pretty quickly. Some people have what it takes to innovate, to disrupt, to lead technological revolutions from the ground up." His eyes found mine across the table, pinning me in place. "Others are better suited to well-supporting roles." He gave me a slow, deliberate smile, a final twist of the knife. "Not everyone can handle a real career in tech." The silence that followed was absolute. It was so complete it had a sound, a ringing, hollow hum. My mother looked mortified, her face pale. My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair, suddenly finding his water glass fascinating. Sophia stared intently at her plate, her knuckles white. I felt Ben's hand find mine under the table, his grip a lifeline of support. And in that deafening silence from the other end of the table, my grandmother's voice cut through the tension like a shard of ice. "Is that why your sister's company just bought his—" Time stopped. Every head at the table swiveled in unison. First to Grandma Evelyn, her expression serene, then to me, my face a careful mask of neutrality, and finally to Leo. The sound of his heavy silver fork clattering against his china plate was like a gunshot in the silent room. His face, just moments before, so composed and smug, became a rapid, horrified slideshow of emotions. First a flicker of pure confusion, as if he'd misheard the words. Then a wave of dawning, sickening comprehension, followed by the rising tide of absolute cornered animal panic. The confident master of the universe vanished, replaced by a boy who had just been caught in a lie. What he sputtered, his eyes wide and frantic, darting between our grandmother and me as if looking for an escape route. What are you talking about? Grandma Evelyn took a calm, deliberate sip of her water, holding his terrified gaze. I'm simply asking a question, dear, she said, her voice deceptively sweet, each word a perfectly placed stone. I'm asking if that's why Clara's company Nexus Dynamics just acquired your little startup. Apex Innovations, isn't it? Because they're the real tech innovators. The table erupted into a cacophony of confused murmurs. What does she mean? My father asked, his brow furrowed as he looked from his mother to me, completely bewildered. Clara's company bought Leo's company. That doesn't make any sense. Leo's face had flushed a deep, blotchy red. That's not what happened, he stammered, his voice cracking, losing all its earlier baritone confidence. We were acquired, yes, but it was a strategic exit, a partnership I chose to sell, and Clara had nothing to do with it. He threw a hand in my direction, his desperation making him reckless. She works in marketing, for God's sake. There it was, I thought, the box he'd always put me in, his last desperate defense. Every single pair of eyes in the room turned to me. The entire room held its breath, waiting for my response. For a fleeting moment, I considered letting it go. I could have laughed it off, made a joke, and preserved his dignity and the fragile peace of the evening. But then I remembered my grandmother's words. Peace built on lies isn't peace. It's a cage. I remembered all the years I had spent dimming my own light so his could shine brighter. No more. I took a slow breath, letting it out steadily. I met my brother's panicked eyes with a calmness that felt foreign and powerful. Actually, I said, my voice even and clear, betraying none of the turmoil inside me. I'm the director of strategic acquisitions at Nexus Dynamics. I've been in that role for almost 2 years now. Leo stared at me, his mouth slightly agape, as if I'd started speaking in a foreign language. That's impossible. You would have said something. Would I have? I asked quietly, letting the question hang in the air. When exactly would I have mentioned it? Leo, between your lectures on blockchain or your detailed explanations of why my job isn't real tech work. Wait, my father interjected, his face a mask of confusion. You're saying you were involved in this, in buying your own brother's company? She's lying, Leo snapped, his voice shrill. He pointed a trembling finger at me. She's trying to take credit for my success, for my exit. If she worked in acquisitions, I would have known my team dealt with Nexus executives. Your team dealt with my team, I corrected him, my voice cutting through his hysteria like a surgeon's scalpel. I recused myself from the direct negotiations because of our relationship, Dad. It was the ethical thing to do. But yes, I was involved in an advisory capacity. In fact, I'm the one who initially identified Apex Innovations as an acquisition target. The stunned silence that followed was somehow even more profound than the first. It was broken by the soft, hesitant voice of Leo's wife, Sophia. She wouldn't look at her husband, staring instead at her folded hands in her lap. It's true, Leo, she whispered, her voice trembling. I saw her name on some of the preliminary paperwork. The conflict of interest disclosure, I just assumed you knew and weren't mentioning it for some reason. Leo looked at his wife as if she had physically struck him. The look of utter betrayal on his face was absolute. You knew, and you didn't tell me. I thought you knew, Sophia protested, finally looking up, her voice rising with a defensive edge. Why wouldn't you know what your own sister does for a living? Because she's lying! Leo roared, shoving himself back from the table with such violence that his chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor and nearly tipped over. His face was contorted with a terrifying mixture of rage and wounded pride. He stood over us, his fists clenched. This is sabotage, that's what this is. You were always jealous, even when we were kids. You couldn't stand it when I got the better grades or the bigger trophy. You deliberately targeted my company, didn't you? You couldn't stand that I was finally succeeding, so you had your corporate behemoth swallow me whole just to ruin it. I remained seated, looking up at his raging face. The fear I thought I would feel was gone, replaced by an ice-cold clarity. Your company was 3 months from bankruptcy. Leo, I said, my voice level and devoid of emotion, each word a clinical fact. You had a brilliant piece of technology, but no sustainable business model. The acquisition didn't ruin your company. It saved it. It saved your employees' jobs. And it saved you from personal and financial ruin. "How dare you!" he screamed, his voice echoing through the house. "You know nothing about tech, about business." "Leo, please," my mother cried, her hands fluttering at her chest. "I will not calm down," he snapped, turning his rage on her. "My entire life, my own sister has been undermining me, and now she's trying to claim she saved me. That's rich." I looked around the table at the shocked, horrified faces of my family. I had their full, undivided attention. Finally, "I'm not claiming I saved anything," I said, my voice rising just enough to command the room. "I'm just telling you the truth. Your startup had valuable IP and talented engineers. That's why we acquired it. It was a good business decision for Nexus Dynamics. It was never, ever personal." Leo let out a bitter, barking laugh. "Right, just business. Is that why you never said a word, because it was so impersonal?" "I never mentioned my role, Leo. I said simply delivering the final devastating truth because you never once asked." The raw honesty of the statement hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen out of the room. He opened his mouth to argue, but no words came out. He looked at me, at our parents, at his wife, and saw nothing but the reflection of his own colossal ego. Defeated, he turned without another word and stormed out of the dining room. A moment later, the front door slammed shut, the sound rattling the crystal glasses on the table. The slam of the front door echoed the frantic beating of my own heart. The stunned faces of my family were a blur, a tableau of shock and confusion frozen in the warm dining room light. In the ringing silence that followed, my mother whispered my name, a question and a plea in one. My father looked utterly lost, his world tilted on its axis. Sophia, my brother's wife, made a move to stand, her expression torn with worry. I should go talk to him." "No," I said, the word leaving my lips before I'd consciously formed it. I pushed my chair back, the sound a soft scrape against the floor. I stood up, feeling every eye in the room on me. "I'll go. This is between us." Ben squeezed my hand under the table one last time, a silent message of support. I walked out of the dining room, down the familiar hallway, and pushed open the front door into the cool night air. He accused me of sabotage. The truth was, I'd just saved him from utter ruin. Now, on the cold front porch under the pale moonlight, it was time for the final audit. He was sitting on the top step, his shoulders slumped, staring out at the quiet suburban street where we'd grown up. He didn't look up as I sat down, a careful distance away from him. The air between us crackled with years of unspoken resentment. "Come to gloat?" he asked flatly, his voice raw. "No, Leo," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I came to talk. For once, to actually talk." He let out a harsh, humorless laugh. "What's there to talk about? You won. Congratulations. You finally took me down." "This isn't about winning or losing," I countered, my patience wearing thin. "It's about truth. And for years you've constructed a narrative that simply isn't true. You've convinced our family, and maybe even yourself, that what I do is trivial because it's not real tech work." "So this was what revenge?" he shot back, turning to glare at me. "Getting your big, important company to swallow mine just to prove a point." I sighed, a wave of weariness washing over me. "Do you really believe that? Do you honestly think I would risk my professional reputation, my entire career, and violate corporate ethics just for some petty sibling revenge?" I leaned forward slightly. "Let's talk in a language you understand, Leo. Let's talk about the data. Because the numbers don't lie." He flinched but didn't look away. "Your pitch decks were beautiful." I began, my voice taking on the clinical tone I used in boardrooms, full of impressive projections and synergy maps. But the reality was something else entirely. Your customer acquisition cost was more than 5 times the industry average for a SaaS startup. You were spending a fortune to get each new user, and your churn rate was catastrophic. For every 2 customers you signed, 1 was leaving within 60 days. Do you have any idea how unsustainable that is? He was silent, just staring at the sidewalk. You burned through your Series A funding in 9 months when it should have lasted 18. You secured a bridge loan based on revenue projections that were pure fantasy. Projections you had no viable strategy to meet. Your marketing budget was allocated to vanity metrics, social media impressions, and blog mentions, with no coherent sales funnel to convert that attention into actual revenue. You had a 3-month runway, Leo. 90 days. Before you would have missed payroll, defaulted on your loans, and had to declare bankruptcy. Your brilliant exit strategy wasn't a strategy. It was a fire sale you didn't even know you were having. I let the facts hang in the cold night air. I watched as his arguments, his entire carefully constructed reality, crumbled under the sheer, unassailable weight of my knowledge. His bravado evaporated, leaving behind something I hadn't seen in years: raw vulnerability. The rigid line of his shoulders softened. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of pure exhaustion. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its defensive edge. It was small cracked. It was really failing, wasn't it? The question, so full of genuine despair, caught me off guard. All the anger I had felt dissipated, replaced by a strange hollow ache. The technology was sound, I said carefully, honestly. The core algorithm was brilliant, truly. But yes, Leo, the business was in trouble. He nodded slowly, absorbing the blow. I kept thinking the next round of funding would solve everything. He admitted, his voice barely a whisper. That we just needed a little more runway. But each milestone we set, we'd miss or barely hit, and then we'd just set a new one further out. That's a classic startup death spiral, I offered gently. It's why most of them fail. I didn't want to fail, he said, and for the first time he looked directly at me. In the moonlight, I was startled to see the raw, unfiltered pain in his expression. The arrogant mask was gone, and in its place was just my brother, lost and afraid. I've built my entire identity around being the tech genius in the family, the successful one. What am I if that's not true? The question hung between us, heavy with the weight of our entire lives. It was about more than just his company. It was about the roles we had been assigned, the narrative we had all participated in. I thought carefully before I responded. You are a tech genius, Leo. That part is true. Your coding skills are incredible, and the core technology at Apex is genuinely innovative. That's not in question. He looked up, a flicker of his old self in his eyes. But I continued, my voice soft but firm. Building a successful company requires more than just technical brilliance. It needs a business model. It needs market understanding, financial planning, and a sales strategy. It needs all the things you always dismissed as unimportant, the things you called a joke. He winced, the truth of it landing like a physical blow. Things you're good at, he acknowledged quietly. Yes, I said. Things I'm good at. We could have been a team, Leo. We could have been complementing each other's strengths all these years. Instead, you treated me like I was somehow less than you, because my focus was on the business side of tech. He was silent for several long moments, staring at his hands. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with a remorse I had never heard from him before. I've been an ass, haven't I? The blunt admission startled a short, surprised laugh out of me. Yes, Leo, you really, really have. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. I'm sorry, Clara, he said, his voice finally clear. I really am. I don't think I ever realized how dismissive I've been, not until I heard it all played back to me tonight. It was the first genuine apology I could remember receiving from him in my entire adult life. It felt monumental. Thank you for saying that I managed. We sat in silence for another minute, the only sound the distant chirp of crickets. It wasn't a comfortable silence, not yet, but it wasn't hostile anymore. It was progress. Finally, he stood up, brushing the dirt from his pants. He looked back at the warm glow of the house. This is going to be awkward, isn't it? Probably, I admitted, standing up beside him. But maybe it's time we were honest with each other, and with them. I nodded toward the house. No more pretending. He took a deep breath. No more pretending, he agreed. He offered me his hand, a gesture so formal it was almost comical. I bypassed it, and to his surprise gave him a quick, awkward hug. Then together we walked back toward the front door, toward a family dinner that was about to enter its second, even more uncomfortable act, the reckoning. 3 months after the explosion, the battlefield had become our weekly lunch spot. The polished oak dining table of my childhood home was replaced by the gleaming white and chrome of the Nexus Dynamics cafeteria. The fragile piece forged on the front porch that Easter evening had, against all odds, solidified into something real, something durable. It was a strange new world, and we were navigating it one Tuesday lunch at a time. He was already there when I arrived, a half-eaten sandwich forgotten next to him as he sketched furiously on a napkin. The old Leo would have been holding court, speaking loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. This new Leo was hunched over his work with a quiet intensity, his brow furrowed in concentration. You're going to get marinara sauce on the schematics, I said, sliding into the chair opposite him. He looked up, his eyes bright with an excitement I hadn't seen since we were kids building circuit boards in the garage. Clara, look at this. He pushed the napkin across the table. It was covered in a complex diagram of arrows and nodes. It's the integration plan for the Apex algorithm. Marcus, my new manager, thinks we can restructure the data pipeline here, and here he pointed with a fry and increase processing speed by another 12%. 12%, Clara. The enterprise clients will lose their minds. Marcus is sharp, I agreed, genuinely impressed. But have you stress-tested the impact on system stability? A 12% speed boost is useless if it increases the crash rate. He paused, considered it, and nodded. Good point. I'll run the simulations this afternoon. He took a bite of his sandwich. It's actually building on something your data science team suggested. He admitted a statement that would have been unthinkable 4 months ago. Turns out there are some smart people here at the corporate sellout. We both laughed. In the 3 months since he'd taken the position as a technical advisor, I'd watched him, slowly, painfully at times, adapt. There had been rough patches. His tendency to speak with blunt, unfiltered certainty had ruffled some feathers in HR, and he'd initially bristled at the layers of corporate approval required for even minor changes. But he was learning. More surprisingly, he seemed to be enjoying the collaboration, the stability, and the immense resources at his disposal. He was still a genius with code, but he was slowly learning that a brilliant engine is useless without a team of skilled mechanics to maintain it, and a savvy driver to get it to the finish line. Speaking of teams, he said, lowering his voice, how do you deal with a senior engineer who's brilliant but thinks process is for mortals? I spent the next 10 minutes giving him advice on management strategies, on setting clear expectations, and on appealing to an engineer's ego by framing processes as efficiency challenges. It was surreal. He was asking for my help, on the soft skills he used to mock. Our conversation drifted to family. Our parents had visited the sprawling Nexus Dynamics campus the previous week, a trip I had orchestrated with some trepidation. It had been a revelation for them. My father, who had spent decades picturing me making brochures, walked through the halls of the acquisitions department with a look of stunned awe. He peppered me with fumbling but genuine questions about valuation models and market analysis. He watched as I led a meeting with my team, his expression a mixture of pride and dawning comprehension. He finally saw what I did. He saw my empire. I think they're still processing it all, Leo said, a wry smile on his face. Dad cornered me in the lobby afterward. He said, "She has a team of 15 people, Leo. 15. Like he was trying to solve a complex math problem. Leo shook his head. 20 years of thinking I was the only tech person in the family, and now he's trying to understand that you've been quietly outranking me for years." Not outranking, I corrected gently. Different paths, different skills. He nodded, acknowledging the distinction. Fair enough. Speaking of family, are you free for dinner at Grandma Evelyn's this weekend? She specifically requested both of us. I smiled. Wouldn't miss it for the world. That Saturday, we gathered in our grandmother's cozy apartment. The scent of her famous pot roast filled the air, a warm and comforting contrast to the cold, sterile confrontation of Easter. After the meal, she served coffee in her living room and fixed us both with her characteristic direct gaze. So she said, settling into her favorite armchair, "How are my 2 tech executives getting along these days?" Leo and I exchanged an amused glance. "Subtlety isn't your strong suit, is it, Grandma?" he teased. "At my age, dear, there's no time for beating around the bush," she replied. "We're doing well," Leo answered, his tone sincere. "Better than I expected, honestly. Turns out our skills really do complement each other." "He's learning to accept feedback without taking it as a personal attack," I added with a smirk. "And she's learning to give feedback without sounding like a corporate training manual," Leo countered good-naturedly. Grandma Evelyn smiled, a look of deep satisfaction on her face. "Good. Family should be honest with each other, but kindly so. I've been thinking a lot about that Easter dinner." The room grew quiet, the memory still potent. "For years," I said, looking into my coffee cup, "we all participated in a fiction. The fiction that Leo was the only tech success story. I did it by staying quiet about my achievements. Leo did it by exaggerating his. And the rest of the family did it by never questioning the narrative. It was comfortable," Leo admitted, his voice low. "For me, anyway. I got to be the star." "And what have you learned from having that comfort disrupted?" Grandma asked him, her eyes soft but piercing. He considered the question seriously. "That comfort isn't the same as growth," he said finally. "That being the star kept me from learning the things I desperately needed to know. And..." He glanced at me, his expression open and honest that I missed out on having a potential ally because I was too busy treating my sister like a competitor. Grandma nodded approvingly before turning her gaze to me. And you, Clara, what have you learned? I thought of the years of silence, of swallowing my accomplishments, of making myself smaller. That silence isn't peace, I said. It's suppression. That diminishing myself to make others comfortable wasn't serving anyone, least of all me. And that authenticity, while sometimes incredibly uncomfortable, is the only way to be truly known and truly loved. Very good, Grandma said, sounding like the professor she once was. Now the real test will be carrying these lessons forward. Family patterns have a way of reasserting themselves if you're not vigilant. On the drive home that night, I felt both exhausted and strangely invigorated. Years of family dynamics had been upended, old patterns shattered, and new, healthier ones were slowly taking their place. I realized that my relationship with my brother and with my family had been like a faulty piece of code patched over for years, but fundamentally broken. The Easter confrontation hadn't been a bug. It had been a necessary, painful system reboot. We would never be the siblings from a sentimental greeting card. We were too different, too shaped by our individual histories. But we had found a new foundation, one built not on a flawed family narrative, but on a shared, hard-won respect. The truth, as it turned out, hadn't destroyed our family as I'd once feared it might. It had rebuilt it. It had set us free. It was a lesson I carried forward into every aspect of my life, that authentic connection built on a foundation of honesty was the most valuable and disruptive technology of all.